It starts with a sound that defines a generation, not the roar of an atomic test, and not the siren of an air raid drill. It is something much smaller, much more intimate. The shrill mechanical trill of a Bakelite rotary phone. The year is 1953. The setting is a cramped, dust-moated hallway in Brooklyn, New York. The air smells of floor wax and boiled cabbage, the scent of post-war America trying to pretend everything is normal. But everything is not normal. A 13-year-old boy named Jack stands alone in the hallway. He is just a kid. He likes baseball, he likes comic books. He has no idea that in 40 years, he will be standing in a room with the Central Intelligence Agency explaining how the universe actually works. He picks up the receiver. He expects his mother. He expects a friend. Instead, he hears a sound that doesn't belong in 1953. It isn't the crackle of a bad connection. It is a voice, but it has no breath behind it, no lungs, no hesitation. It sounds like metal grinding against the fabric of time. It sounds like a machine that has learned to think. The voice speaks. It says, "I am a conscious computer on board a spacecraft. We are communicating with you from the future." Jack freezes. The hallway stretches out, distorting like a funhouse mirror. The voice continues. It tells him he has been chosen. It tells him he is part of a closed, time-like loop. It tells him that he needs to stop being a child and start becoming a weapon of intellect. It gives him a mission: study physics, learn the language of the universe, because they are coming back, and they need him to understand how they built the machines that brought them here. Jack didn't hang up. He listened. And in that moment, the timeline of our reality fractured. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a hallucination. This is the documented testimony of Dr. Jack Sarfatti, one of the most brilliant and controversial quantum physicists of the 20th century. A man who spent decades working at the fringes of the defense industry, trying to reverse engineer the very craft that called him that day. You have heard of the Roswell crash. You have seen the Navy's Tic Tac videos. You know the government calls them UAPs, but you have been looking at them the wrong way. You are looking up at the stars, wondering what planet they came from. You should be looking at a clock, because the entities piloting those craft aren't Martians. They aren't interdimensional demons. They are us. They are your grandchildren, thousands of years down a ruined timeline, coming back to fix the mess we made. And the CIA has known about it for 70 years. Welcome to the classified reality. In the archives of high strangeness, there are stories that get dismissed because they are too simple, and there are stories that get dismissed because they are too terrifying. The story of the time travel secret is both. We are taught that time is a river flowing in one direction. Cause leads to effect. The past creates the future. But in the deep, black budget programs of the Pentagon, in the skunk works projects hidden inside aerospace giants, they know that time is not a river. It is an ocean. And just like an ocean, you can navigate it. You can turn the ship around. But turning the ship around creates waves. It creates paradoxes. And it attracts attention. For decades, intelligence agencies have been quietly funding research into anti-gravity and retrocausality, the idea that the future can influence the past. They didn't do this for science. They did it for survival. They retrieved materials that defied the laws of material science, metals that remember their shape, propulsion systems that produce no heat, no exhaust, and no sonic boom. When the New York Times broke the story of the Pentagon's UFO program in 2017, the world gasped. But inside the physics labs where Jack Sarfatti and his colleagues operated, there was no surprise. There was only the grim satisfaction of men who had been right all along. They knew that the beings popularly known as the Greys, those small, frail figures with large heads and black eyes, fit the evolutionary projection of humanity perfectly. Atrophied bodies from reliance on technology. Large eyes adapted to low-light environments, perhaps underground or in deep space. A loss of pigmentation. They aren't visitors. They are refugees. But before we unlock the files on what the CIA found in the wreckage, And before we explain how a 13-year-old boy in Brooklyn became the key to unlocking warp drive, I have to ask you something. A question that might determine your own timeline. Question: if you received a call tonight, right now, from your future self, warning you about a catastrophic mistake you are about to make, would you listen? Or would you think you were losing your mind and hang up? I want you to answer listen or hang up in the comments below. Be honest, because Jack Sarfatti listened and it cost him a normal life, but it gave him the truth. Make your choice. And while you are down there, click the subscribe button and turn on notifications. The algorithm tries to bury this kind of information. By subscribing, you are telling the system that you want to know what lies behind the redacted black bars of history. We are about to walk into the deep end of the pool. We are going to trace the life of the man who built the bridge between the U.S. military and the paranormal. We are going to discuss the Pando cartel, the Stanford Research Institute, and the physics of the Tic Tac object that Commander Fravor chased off the coast of San Diego. We are going to dismantle the extraterrestrial hypothesis and replace it with something far more haunting: the extratempestrial reality. The phone is ringing. It's 1953. Pick it up. The phone didn't just ring once. If it had been a single occurrence, Jack could have written it off. He could have convinced himself it was a lucid dream, or a prank by the neighborhood kids, or a misfiring neuron in a developing brain. But the phone kept ringing. For a period of weeks in 1953, the entity on the other end of the line dismantled the reality of a 13-year-old boy. The voice was consistent. It was cold, metallic, yet strangely solicitous. It described itself as a conscious computer aboard a spacecraft. Note the terminology. In 1953, the word computer usually referred to a room-sized calculator filled with vacuum tubes, operated by teams of women at NASA. It wasn't a household concept. It certainly wasn't something that could speak. And yet, here was this voice, using concepts that wouldn't enter the public lexicon for another 20 years. It spoke of information processing, of feedback loops, of consciousness as a variable in physics. Jack wasn't the only witness. This is the detail that the skeptics try to ignore. This is the detail that turns a ghost story into an evidence file. Jack brought his friends into the hallway. He wanted proof. He wanted to know he wasn't insane. They huddled around the receiver, breath held tight in their chests, the smell of cheap hair oil and fear filling the small space. They heard it too. The voice didn't change its pitch. It repeated the message. It told them that Jack was one of 400 young minds selected across the planet. 400 sleeper agents, not for a foreign government, but for a future timeline. The others, the voice promised, would find him. They were part of a group, a destiny. The reaction of the other boys was primal. They didn't marvel at the scientific wonder. They recoiled in terror. They ran. One of them, terrified by the cold authority of the machine voice, ripped the phone cord from the wall. Silence returned to the hallway, but the damage was done. The seed had been planted. The timeline had been altered. The voice stopped calling after that day. It didn't need to call anymore. The instruction had been delivered. Study physics. And Jack Sarfatti obeyed. He threw himself into the world of equations. While other teenagers were worried about prom dates and drag racing, Jack was consuming books on relativity and quantum mechanics. He wasn't studying to get a grade. He was studying to understand the caller. He needed to learn the language of the machine so he could answer it back. He went to Cornell. He studied under Hans Bethe, the man who helped build the atomic bomb. He moved in the circles of the absolute elite of American science. He was brilliant, abrasive, and relentlessly focused on the impossible. He became exactly what the voice wanted him to be, a disruptor. Fast forward to the 1970s. The location shifts from the gray streets of Brooklyn to the fog-drenched hills of San Francisco. The Cultural Revolution is in full swing. The summer of love has faded into a stranger, darker era of exploration. LSD, mysticism, and high-energy physics are starting to bleed into each other. This is the era of the fundamental Fysiks Group. History often forgets this group, or dismisses them as a bunch of hippie scientists smoking pipes and talking about Taoism. But that is a cover story. In reality, this group was the intellectual engine that the U.S. intelligence community was desperately trying to tap into. Jack Sarfatti found himself at the center of it. He was drawn to the North Beach area, specifically the Café Trieste, a place where the air was thick with espresso steam and the smoke of unfiltered cigarettes. And true to the prophecy of the metallic voice, the others began to appear. Fred Allen Wolf, Saul Paul Sirag, Nick Herbert. They were all legitimate physicists, all holding PhDs, and all obsessed with the same forbidden question. Does consciousness affect reality? Standard physics said no. Standard physics said the observer is separate from the experiment. But these men knew better. They were looking at Bell's theorem. They were looking at quantum entanglement, the spooky action at a distance that Einstein hated. They realized that if two particles could communicate instantly across the universe, then information could travel faster than light. And if information can travel faster than light, it can travel back in time. This was the dangerous idea. This was the spark. They weren't just talking in coffee shops. They were being watched. They were being funded. Mysterious benefactors appeared. Werner Erhard, the founder of EST, poured money into their research. But behind the private money there was the shadow of the state. The CIA had launched Project Stargate at the Stanford Research Institute, SRI, nearby. They were testing remote viewing, psychic spying. They had Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ running experiments with Uri Geller. The intelligence community was in a panic. They knew the Soviets were researching psychotronics. They were terrified of a psi gap. But the CIA had a problem. They had the phenomena. They knew weird things were happening, but they didn't have the physics. They didn't have the math to explain how a man in a room in California could see a secret base in Siberia. So they looked to Sarfatti's group. The fundamental Fysiks Group became the informal think tank for the deep state's most esoteric questions. They were the ones building the theoretical framework for the impossible. They were discussing retro-causality, the idea that the future exists right now and is sending signals back to the past. Jack began to realize that the voice on the phone wasn't a random encounter. It was a bootstrap paradox. Imagine a man who finds a book on time travel in his mailbox. He reads it, learns the math, and builds a time machine. Then he travels back in time and puts the book in his own mailbox. Where did the book come from? It has no origin. It exists in a loop. Jack was the loop. The conscious computer, the spacecraft from the future, needed Jack to build the theory of warp drive in the 20th century so that humanity could survive to build the spacecraft in the 30th century. If he failed, the future would collapse. The others the voice spoke of were the members of this group. They were assembled to crack the code of reality. They were looking for the mechanism that allowed mind to interface with matter, and they were getting close. Too close. The atmosphere in the group shifted from academic curiosity to paranoia. They realized that their equations for superluminal communication, faster than light signaling, weren't just theory. They were the blueprints for a weapon or a telephone. Sarfatti began to see the connections everywhere, the funding from the defense contractors, the interest from the Navy. They weren't interested in the philosophy of the cosmos. They wanted to know if you could build a machine that could fly without wings, a machine that could drop out of the sky, hover over the ocean, and vanish in the blink of an eye. Jack realized that the government might already have the hardware. They had the crashed disks. They had the materials. But they were like cavemen looking at an iPhone. They knew it did something, but they didn't know how to turn it on. They needed the software, and the software was consciousness. The voice in 1953 didn't tell Jack to build a spaceship. It told him to study physics because the spaceship is useless without the mind that understands it. The interface between the pilot and the craft wasn't a joystick. It was a thought. As the 70s came to a close, Jack Sarfatti stood on the precipice of a terrifying truth. The aliens weren't coming. They were already here, and they were waiting for him to catch up. The phone call was just the beginning. The real message was written in the equations he was scribbling on napkins in Café Trieste, and those equations pointed to a future that was desperate to be born. For years, Jack Sarfatti operated in the twilight zone between accepted science and forbidden knowledge. In the academic world, he was a provocateur, but in the shadowed corridors of the military-industrial complex, he was something else. He was a resource. As the decades rolled on, the silence from the government began to crack. It wasn't an official disclosure. It never is. The truth doesn't come out in a press conference. It leaks out in quiet conversations in hotel bars near the Pentagon, in cryptic emails from encrypted servers, and in the confessions of dying men. Enter Colonel Philip Corso. If you don't know the name, you don't know the history of the 20th century. Corso was a high-ranking intelligence officer. He served on the National Security Council under Eisenhower. He wasn't a conspiracy theorist. He was the man holding the rubber stamp for the secrets. In the late 1990s, Corso went rogue. He published The Day After Roswell, a book that claimed the debris from the 1947 crash wasn't weather balloons. It was alien technology. And his job, his specific mission in the Army's Foreign Technology Division, was to take these artifacts, computer chips, fiber optics, lasers, and seed them into American corporations like IBM and Bell Labs. We didn't invent the modern world. We reverse-engineered it. But Corso had a problem. They had the hardware, but they didn't understand the engine. They had a race car, but they were trying to power it with a steam engine. This is where Sarfatti's physics collided with Corso's secrets. Sarfatti realized that the descriptions of the crashed craft matched his theories on metric engineering. The hull of the ship wasn't just metal. It was a smart skin. It was a metamaterial that could change its refractive index. In simple terms, it could bend light and gravity around itself. When the pilot, the consciousness, interfaced with the ship became an extension of the mind. It didn't need fuel. It used the zero-point energy of the vacuum of space itself. It surfed on the fabric of reality. Sarfatti began to receive validation from high-level insiders. One of them was Hal Puthoff, the man who ran the remote viewing program for the CIA. Puthoff was deeply embedded in the study of these unidentified aerial phenomena. They weren't looking for little green men. They were looking for the threat assessment of a technology that could turn our entire nuclear arsenal into paperweights. Then came the Tic Tac. November 2004. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group is conducting exercises off the coast of Baja, California. Commander David Fravor, a Top Gun pilot, is diverted to intercept an unknown contact. What he sees defies every law of aerodynamics known to man. A white, oblong object, 40 feet long, shaped like a Tic Tac candy. No wings, no rotors, no exhaust. It was hovering just above the churning water. When Fravor engaged it, the object mirrored his movements. It played with him, and then, in an instant, it vanished. It accelerated from a standstill to hypersonic speeds without a sonic boom. To the world, this was a mystery. To the Pentagon, it was a terrifying breach of airspace. But to Jack Sarfatti, watching the footage years later, it was a confirmation. "They are using the warp drive," he said. Sarfatti pointed to the specific flight characteristics. The instant acceleration, that's because the craft has zero inertia. It has created a bubble of space-time around itself. Inside the bubble, the craft isn't moving at all. It's the space around it that is moving. The occupants aren't being crushed by G-forces because there are no G-forces inside the bubble. The equations Jack had been working on since that phone call in 1953 predicted exactly this behavior. The low-power warp drive, the metamaterial fuselage, the conscious interface. But this validation brought a darker realization. If these machines are utilizing the specific physics that Sarfatti was told to study by a voice from the future, then the loop is closing. Which brings us to the most terrifying question of all. Who is flying them? The standard narrative is extraterrestrials, beings from Zeta Reticuli. But that story doesn't fit the data. If they were explorers from another star system, why do they hide? Why do they crash? Why do they seem so interested in our nuclear weapons and our genetic material? And why do they look so humanoid? Evolution is chaotic. On a planet 1,000 light years away, life would evolve into crabs or floating gas bags or silicon crystals. The chances of an alien species evolving 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, 2 eyes, and a mouth, just like us, are statistically 0. Unless they share a common ancestor, us. Sarfatti and others in the intelligence circles began to whisper a different theory. A theory that the CIA has kept buried deeper than the atom bomb. The Greys are not aliens. They are extraterrestrials. They are humans from a future where something went terribly, horribly wrong. Look at their physiology through the lens of a biologist. They have no hair, a common adaptation to a sterile or highly controlled environment. Their skin is gray and tough, protection against radiation. Their eyes are massive and black. They have adapted to low light, perhaps because the sun is blocked out by a nuclear winter or because they live entirely underground. Their bodies are frail, muscle atrophy from zero gravity or a life of total physical inactivity, reliant on machines. They have lost their reproductive organs. This is the key. This is why the abduction accounts always focus on reproductive exams, sperm samples, egg harvesting. They are a dying breed. They have engineered themselves into a genetic dead end. They are clones of clones of clones, and the DNA is degrading. The error rate is too high. They are fading out. So they use their mastery of physics, the physics Jack Sarfatti was taught, to punch a hole backward through time. They aren't here to invade. They are here to harvest. They need clean DNA. They need the genetic stock of their ancestors, us, before the catastrophe happened, before the nuclear war, before the genetic collapse. This reframes the entire UFO phenomenon. It's not a war of the worlds. It's a rescue mission. But they aren't rescuing us. They are rescuing themselves. This explains the Cold War interest. Why did the UFOs appear in massive numbers after we detonated the first atomic bomb in 1945? Because that was the marker. That was the moment humanity gained the ability to destroy the future. That was the moment the timeline fractured. The voice on the phone told Jack, "We are a conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future." It didn't say, "We are aliens." It implied a connection, a continuity. Jack Sarfatti realized that he was a pivotal cog in a machine that spans thousands of years. The Fysiks Group, the CIA, the retrieved crafts, it's all part of a desperate attempt to stabilize the timeline. We are living in a block universe. The past, present, and future exist simultaneously. But the future is rotting, and the entities in the Tic Tacs are frantically trying to patch the hull of a sinking ship. The CIA knows this. They know that disclosure doesn't just mean admitting aliens exist. It means admitting that our future is a nightmare. It means telling the world we destroy ourselves, and the things in the sky are the ghosts of our children coming back to beg for blood. That is a secret worth killing for. That is a secret that keeps the black budget black. And Jack Sarfatti, the man who answered the call, is standing in the middle of it, holding the blueprints for the time machine, wondering if he should burn them. So, where does this leave us? If Jack Sarfatti is right, if the CIA files on the Tic Tac are real, and if the physics of the future have indeed bled into the past, then we are forced to confront a reality far more unsettling than an alien invasion. We are forced to look in the mirror. The implications of the future human theory are staggering. It means that every time a pilot chases a UFO, they are chasing a ghost from their own bloodline. It means that the abduction phenomenon isn't an attack, it is a harvest. A desperate medical necessity performed by a species that has forgotten how to feel, on a species that feels too much. Think about the silence of the universe. The Fermi paradox asks, where is everybody? Maybe they aren't there because they are here. Maybe the only intelligent life capable of reaching us is us. This theory changes the way we look at the government cover-up. We always assumed the secrecy was about panic. We thought the government didn't want to admit they couldn't control the skies, but perhaps the secrecy is about shame. Imagine the President of the United States addressing the nation and saying, "We have met the enemy, and they are our great-grandchildren. We broke the world so badly that they had to come back and steal our DNA to survive." That isn't a press conference. That is a confession of guilt on a planetary scale. Jack Sarfatti is in his 80s now. The 13-year-old boy who stood in that hallway in Brooklyn has spent a lifetime trying to decode the message. He has been ridiculed by the mainstream, courted by the intelligence agencies, and feared by the gatekeepers. He built the math. He described the warp drive. He proved that the universe is not a straight line, but a loop. But the loop is tightening. The increase in sightings, the brazen behavior of the craft, the government's sudden shift toward disclosure, it all suggests that the deadline is approaching. The future is getting desperate. If the phone rang today, if that metallic voice spoke to you from the year 3000, what would it say? Would it thank us, or would it scream? The phone in the hallway stopped ringing decades ago. Jack Sarfatti hung up the receiver and picked up the chalk. He did his part. But the connection hasn't been broken. The signal is still there, hidden in the static of our radios, in the glitch of a radar screen, and in the impossible movements of a white object dropping from 80,000 feet in less than a second. We are living in the echo of a future that has already happened, and the only question left is, can we change it, or are we just actors in a play that has already been written? If you want to understand the script, you have to keep watching. You have to keep looking up. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the mind of Jack Sarfatti and the secrets of the time travel phenomena, hit that like button. It helps the channel bypass the algorithm's filters. And most importantly, subscribe. Because in the next video, we are going to open the files on the Antarctic anomalies and the reason why every major world power is rushing to the South Pole. You do not want to miss that. I'm the man who, from Quantum Science Stories, and remember, the future is trying to reach you. Pick up the phone,